On a broken, lifeless ridge, stabbing up into the sickly fog, a single clone trooper stood to his feet. A gust of wind blew through the fog for a brief moment, and in the valley below, the trooper could see all that remained of Catalan City. The former planetary capital sprawled out below him, a lifeless maze of shriveled concrete and twisted durasteel, charred, broken, and covered uniformly in a thick layer of ash. It was a sight that the trooper had seen in many other places on this waste of a planet, a memorial to the horrors that had befallen Atraken. Hello and welcome back to our latest series. Today, we're going to be looking back at another of the bloodiest battles in the history of the Star Wars galaxy, looking for insights into the soldiers who fought and died in them, with the goal of understanding the worst day of these beings' lives, and in many cases, the last day of these beings' lives. Today, we'll be taking a look at one of the Clone Wars' longest battles, a fairly obscure engagement that we've talked about before, the Battle of Atraken. This early battle, which proved beyond doubt that the Republic wasn't fighting a clean war against the Separatists, was one of the war's most grueling, and today we'll be examining it from a loyalist perspective. Beginning just a week after the Battle of Geonosis, the Battle of Atraken was one of the first major battles of the Clone Wars, but unlike most of the other battles that began in the war's first month, which were typically brief, the Battle of Atraken raged for 11 months, completely destroying the world it was fought over. That world, the planet Atraken, was obscure, a fairly ordinary terrestrial world on the edge of Separatist space. It was inhabited by a small population of 1 million beings, and its primary industry was mining, like many planets in its region of space. Atraken might have escaped notice in the Clone Wars if it weren't rich in one very important resource: Doonium. Doonium was an extremely valuable ore that was essential to the production of capital ship hulls, the metal that gave Star Destroyers that distinctive grey-white color. It was highly sought after by both the Republic and the Confederacy for obvious reasons, and since Atraken was a rich source of it, this made it a very valuable world to both sides. At the start of the Clone Wars, the CIS had taken control of Atraken's mines and begun funneling its ore shipments to Separatist shipyards, but since Atraken was just barely within Separatist space, it wasn't long before a Republic fleet showed up to challenge the Confederacy's monopoly on Atraken Doonium. When Republic forces arrived at Atraken, they demanded that the local Separatist fleet withdraw and relinquish control of Atraken's Doonium Mines, and obviously, Separatists did no such thing. Instead, the Confederacy entrenched on Atraken's surface, converting the planet's mines into massive, kilometers-deep fortresses packed to the brim with battle droids. The Republic responded with invasion, and a bloody, months-long slog began. Battles were fought both on the ground and in orbit, and casualties were heavy for both sides, as well for the Atrakenites, whose cities were utterly destroyed in the crossfire. Vast numbers of clone troopers and battle droids were deployed to Atraken over the course of the battle, with the only known GAR unit being Major Nick Rostu's 44th Division, which joined the fight in the later stages of the battle. For months, the Battle of Atraken was effectively a stalemate. The droid army was entrenched deep in the planet's crust, and the Loyalists were unable to flush them out, but the Separatists were similarly unable to dislodge the GAR from its beachheads on the surface. To break this stalemate, both sides turned to increasingly extreme methods. The Republic began this escalation with Operation Catabatic, a series of extremely destructive airstrikes that drove the droid army from several key positions, but also laid waste to the surface of the planet. This turned the tide of the battle in the Republic's favor, but the Confederacy responded to the Republic's ruthless offensive by unleashing biochemical weapons, which killed countless clones and massive amounts of civilians. These biochemical weapons also seeped into Atraken's water table, and even as the Republic finally captured the planet's Doonium Mines, Atraken was well on its way to becoming a dead world. Turning away from the entrance to the mine, a yawning black pit that bore into the mountainside, escaping more choked with debris and bodies, a lone clone trooper turned and walked along a small shelf of rock that jutted out over the valley below. The shelf was completely barren, a slab of lifeless stone with a slick coating of grey mud, the colour of which was reflected in Atraken's cloud-filled skies. It had been sunny now and again his first few weeks here, the trooper remembered, but these days, Atraken was always overcast. He imagined it must have been nicer in the beginning. He and the rest of the 44th had been late arrivals to the battlefield, and by the time they arrived, much of the planet already lay in ruins. The valley below was thick with fog, but as the trooper reached the edge of the ridge, a wind blew some of the fog aside, allowing the clone a glimpse of Catalan City. It was a lifeless ruin, with not a single building left intact, all buried under a layer of ash. All around, the devastation of the city was mirrored in the countryside. The trooper faintly remembered this valley having been filled with trees beyond the city limits. Now all that remained were gnarled, leafless trunks, their roots poking up through the sickly earth, which was cross-cut by streams of oily, green-brown sludge. The soil had been poisoned here, as it had been everywhere else, along with the water and even the air. As a new wave of toxic fog rolled in, the trooper double-checked his helmet seals. As he did, the silence was broken by a sound from behind, the sound of metal slowly grinding on metal. The trooper spun around, DC raised, scanning the vast pile of rubble at the mouth of the mine for the source of the noise. The rest of his unit was inside the mine and wasn't due to return for a few hours, and he was the only trooper assigned to guard the entrance. If there was movement, it was the enemy. Then the sound came again, and sudden movement drew the clone's eye. A dwarf spider droid lay amongst the wreckage, badly damaged but evidently not destroyed. Two of its legs were missing and another was twisted into an unrecognizable shape. It was attempting to haul itself up on the fourth. Its dome-like head was scorned and dented, and the homing antenna that protruded from it had been smashed, as had one of its eyes. But the other eye still burned an angry red, and it had spotted the trooper. The droid's motors screeched as it slowly turned, angling its laser cannon toward the clone. The trooper briefly considered his odds of finishing the droid off with his DC, and then began to dash to cover. He started a split second too late. The blast lifted him off his feet and flung him into the air, caught within a spray of rock splinters and vaporized mud. He tumbled down the side of the ridge, his plastoid armor fracturing as it struck boulders and outcroppings on the way down. The trooper finally rolled to a stop just before the edge of a small stop 20 meters below the top of the ridge, battered and bruised all over. He groaned, and for a minute simply laid there as his whole body ached. But the trooper soon determined that none of the pain was particularly severe. He didn't seem to have broken anything, and he didn't feel any major bleeding. He shook his head, chuckling. If Major Rostu were here, he might have said that the Force was with him. But then he heard a quiet sound, but not processed by his helmet's audio filters, but coming from within his helmet. A hiss. The air in his helmet took on a bitter taste. The trooper's heart leapt into his throat. His helmet seals had cracked, and the fog was leaking in. By the time the Republic defeated the last droid army holdouts, Atraken was dead. The battle had completely destroyed every settlement on the planet and completely scoured its countryside, and the biochemical weapons the Confederacy had deployed irreparably contaminated the entire planet's water table, causing the extinction of most living things on the planet's surface. Atraken rapidly succumbed, and by the time the Republic was able to plant its flag over the last separatist mining base, the planet was completely uninhabitable. Not that there were many people left to inhabit it. Between the indiscriminate airstrikes carried out by the Republic, the biochemical weapons, and the good old-fashioned crossfire, 90% of Atraken's population had been killed in the fighting. The remaining 100,000 people became refugees, forced to flee their now uninhabitable homeworld. Those who could afford to fled to neighboring systems, and the remainder were forced to throw themselves at the mercy of the refugee relief movement. The RRM ultimately settled the remaining Atrakenites on Trilos, Atraken's lone habitable moon, despite initial trouble with orbital mines preventing access to the moon's surface. Atraken itself was abandoned. Its remaining oceans, the ones that hadn't been boiled away by the fighting, became toxic sludge pools, and the planet's atmosphere became completely unbreathable. Virtually all organic life on Atraken died, leaving only the diehards, an aggressive insect species that was able to feed on the toxic sludge. The Doonium Mines that the battle had been fought over were abandoned shortly after the battle's end, as using them became more effort than it was worth thanks to Atraken's ruined biosphere. In the end, neither the Republic nor the Confederacy got Atraken's Doonium, and neither of them really deserved to after what they had done to the planet. The Battle of Atraken was one of the most brutal battles of the Clone Wars, and it greatly affected how many people thought of the conflict. It showed definitively that neither side, the Loyalists nor the Separatists, were fighting a just war, as they so often claimed. Neither the Republic nor the Confederacy cared about the ordinary people of the galaxy, and they proved it on Atraken, where they destroyed the lives of the ones they were supposed to be fighting for. Over the course of the war, the destruction they visited on Atraken was spread all across the galaxy, on some worlds causing lasting damage that could never truly be repaired. But that does it for today's video. What do you guys think of the series so far? Do you have any suggestions? Let us know in the comment section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.